Christ and the believer, or the soul of the believer for the church, for Christianity. And we looked at themes like seeking and finding in the Song of Songs. The lovers are always separated, seeking one another, finding one another, separated, seeking one another, finding one another, in a cycle that really doesn't end. It doesn't come to a conclusion. The song leaves us at the end as it began, in this cycle of always seeking and finding. We looked at bodies in the Song of Song, especially one whole week on I Am Black and Beautiful, right? And the way that beauty is conceived of in the ancient world and for us today, and how strongly the Song of Songs subverts, right, conventional ideas conventional in its time for about beauty. It's the only thing we learn about the woman in the Song of Songs. Verse after verse after verse after verse of description of her. Your neck is like a tower, but only one straightforward description. And it's her own description, right? I am black and I am beautiful. And we looked at more at the way that bodies are centered in the Song of Songs. That romantic love is embodied in the Song of Songs, and the admiration of the body. And the extent to which the Song of Songs walks this tightrope, sort of between the erotic look and the voyeuristic gaze, right? The Song of Songs invites us to look at the lovers, to view the lovers, to view them together, to view them in their trysts and rendezvous, to look at each other with them, but always at enough of a remove, and in ways that, and it teaches us, the Song of Songs teaches us how to observe one another, not by standing off at a safe distance and peering at the other, but by participating with the other, joining with the other, becoming vulnerable oneself to the other, so that we're sort of in it together, so to speak. It's a mutuality, right? A partnership of looking and viewing. These allegorists, so something I promised we would do is look at the Song of Song as we've come to know it in the context of the rest of the Bible. It's a book in the Bible. We're here because it's in the Bible. And it's a good thing it's in the Bible, or we probably would have missed it. If it was somewhere else, we wouldn't even be paying attention to it. Thank goodness it's in the Bible so that we don't miss it. So how do we make sense of it as part of the Bible? How do we read it as Bible and not just as ancient romantic literature, right? Ancient Israel's romantic literature. The rabbinic allegorists, the ancient rabbis, something I didn't talk about when we talked about them is one of the things that the rabbis loved about reading the Song of Songs as a metaphor for the romantic love, the romantic covenant that exists between God and the people Israel, is that the Bible, their Bible, our Old Testament, has many prophetic descriptions of the relationship between God and Israel as a marriage relationship. And it doesn't look good for the prophets. For the prophets, this is a relationship in which God has been faithful, but the people Israel have been adulterous, have been unfaithful. The prophet Hosea is probably the first of the prophets to get that going. And it's ugly stuff. In the first few chapters of Hosea, the covenant that Israel has with the God of Israel is described as a marriage, and it's a marriage in which the wife, Israel, has gone astray, seeking after other gods. And the God of Israel, Israel's God, Yahweh, extracts obedience from the people Israel through deprivation and the threat of violence, the threat of humiliation, in order to coerce his bride, Israel, into covenant faithfulness. The book of Ezekiel also describes this adulterous relationship, right? This covenant breaking on the part of the people Israel with their rightful spouse, the God of Israel, and describes the adulterous actions of the people Israel, of the wife in this relationship, their dalliances with Egypt, for example. What they're describing is the people having covenants, having treaties with these other nations. You know how you have treaties with other nations to keep yourself safe, right? You say, oh, if we get invaded, you'll come and help us. If you get invaded, we'll come and help you. But for some of the prophets, even these kinds of mundane treaties with other nations were seen as violations of they should trust only in Yahweh, right? Trust only in God. And Ezekiel describes this relationship with Egypt, describes this wife, Israel, in terms that are adulterous to the point of pornography, I would argue. And even in terms of bestiality. It's rough stuff in Ezekiel 16 and 23, and a very, very tough look for our people Israel as this horribly adulterous wife in their relationship with the God of Israel. And so when the rabbis came along later, were reading their Bible, their Hebrew Bible, and this is the relationship they see inscribed in the Bible over and over and over again of their Judaism with the God of the Jews, right? With God. And the Song of Songs, right, is sitting right there as an alternative vision. As an alternative vision. Allegory wasn't new at this time. You know, it wasn't the Jews or the Christians who invented allegory, it was the Greeks. You all remember your Greek myths. Zeus is always coming down disguised as an animal, like a bull or a swan, to rape some poor woman, and then he has children, and then they have terrible lives because they're, and it just, and the gods are always squabbling with one another on Mount Olympus like a bunch of toddlers fighting over crayons. They're just terrible. And the Greeks themselves would read these tales, a century later and be like, oh, they were embarrassed, and they started using this idea of allegory to make these stories less awful, right? And say, oh, well, these aren't really how the gods behave. These are just figurative stories, and they would allegorize them to be stories about the soul and the world and things like this. So Judaism and Christianity were able to pick up this technique of taking kind of horrible old stories from your canonical texts and elevating them into something more noble, more pure, more culturally good. And so when the rabbis saw the Song of Songs and they've got allegory available to them, and they were to say, oh, well, our Bible does not only have a vision of us as adulterous to our God, as cheating on our God. There's also the Song of Songs, which presents a healthy relationship, a healthy union, not a marriage union, but a healthy romantic attachment. And to be able to see, it gave them the possibility to see the relationship between Israel and the God of Israel the way it should be, the way it could be, the way it can be, right? A more hopeful vision of that relationship. A counterpoint, right, to the prophetic view of this dysfunctional, broken relationship. I'm divided in my mind about I know where I'm going, and I'm divided in my mind about how to get there. So we'll come back to what that relationship looks like. We've been looking at it for the past several weeks, so you have some ideas about it, but we're going to come back to it. The book of Genesis, right? Everybody knows the book of Genesis. Have you ever listened to our creeds, like the Apostles' Creed, for example. I believe in God the Father, creator of heaven and earth, Jesus, 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 right? You can feel the narrative of the Apostles' Creed. It starts with the creation of heaven and earth, right? Basically Genesis 1 and 2, right? And then goes to Matthew 1. And just kind of follows the New Testament narrative from there. Everything from Genesis 3 to the end of the Hebrew Bible is just sort of skipped over as, well, that's the fall, right? There's the creation, and then there's the fall, or as the Old Testament describes it, the entirety of the history of the relationship between Israel and the God of Israel. And then there's Jesus. We tend to skip over this. My point with this is that as Christians, our history, Christianity in history, has been way more interested in the first few chapters of Genesis than in the rest of the Hebrew Bible. It's kind of a disproportionate attention. But in those first few chapters of Genesis, you have the creation of human beings, male and female, in Genesis 1. And in Genesis 2, there's more sort of drawn-out talk about a garden, right? A garden that God makes the garden, creates the Adam, whatever the Adam is, the human one, and puts the human one into the garden, and then discovers that the human one is all alone. The God in Genesis 2 and 3 is hilarious because Genesis 1, God is like up on high, snapping God's video. Let there be light. Let there be a separation between light and dark, between what's dry and what's wet. Boom, 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 boom. And then you get into Genesis 2 and 3, and God is like, okay, I got this garden. I'm going to put this person down in it. Oh my goodness, they're alone. That's not good. It's not good for the person to be alone. And God creates every animal of the world. Chickens and snakes and scorpions and hippopotamuses and puts them all in front of the Adam, the human one, and the human one is like, nope, none of these are a partner to me. God's like, well, I guess I'll do something else then. That's the God of Genesis 2 and 3 is the God of, well, I guess I'll try, even Genesis 1 through, I guess I'll try something else now. And then God creates the woman from the human one, and you have man and woman, and the human one, who is now the man, says, oh, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. But because of certain actions that they take, things they wind up expelled from the garden. You can see that part of the interest of Genesis is something about these gender. There's going to become an interest about the relationship between the man and the woman, is there not? Certainly by the time they leave the garden and are expelled into the world, part of the curse that's laid upon the woman is your desire shall be for your husband, but he shall rule over you. So there's this sense of hierarchy, right, by this time. Folks argue about how clear that hierarchy is through the rest of Genesis 1 and 2 and the rest of the creation story. Genesis 1, like I said, all it says is, and then God created human beings, male and female, God created them. There's not like a first and a second, a top and a bottom, there's just male and female, right? And they were both created in the image of God, right? God created human beings in God's own image, male and female, God created them. So God's image is shared equally by both men and women. And God saw that the creation was good, right? Both human beings, both good. In the second story, as I've sort of intimated as I summarized it, we sometimes imagine it as like God created the man. And the man is created as the sort of human norm. This is the default human. Default human is male in the way that we normally imagine that text. And then the woman is created from a bone as this like sort of ancillary, supplementary thing, right? And you get this language of God created the woman as a helper, right? In the old King James Version, unhelpmeet, right? Whatever unhelpmeet is. And so there's this suggestion, right, certainly in translation, of subservience, right? The woman created as a sort of a servant. reading the language in the Hebrew, many would argue that there's something more like what I was saying, that the first human is created as the Adam, not Adam, like that's his name, like, hi, I am Adam, but as the Adam, the human one. There's connotations of, it sounds like the word ground or earth or red, the word red. So there's sort of the red earthy, he's created from clay, right? So there's the red earthy muddy one, human one, and only when God does God's surgery and creates, another, is there a woman and a man. A male, that only then are they male and female. So in this reading, there's more of a sense that you have the default human is not yet gendered, right? The default human is genderless, or both male and female, or however, but not yet male, certainly. And only after there is differentiation, separation, is there male and female. And he says, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Sorry, folks, I mean to have this set so it doesn't do that. I'm going to want that in a second. There we go. Only then, the helpmeet, she's created as an ezer and a counterpoint. The Hebrew language is, she's an ezer and kenegdo. She is the ezer means helper. That's true. To ezer means to help. Out of all the words that the word helper is used in the Hebrew Bible, except this one, it's used frequently, and almost every single time it describes God. God is the helper. You might know the psalm, I look to the hills, from where is my help to come? Right? Similar, it's the same word. God is described in the Psalms and elsewhere over and over again as a helper to Israel, right? God is not a servant to the people of Israel. God is not a subservient charwoman to the people of Israel. God is a helper in the sense of the cavalry, right? This is the cavalry that comes. This is the Savior. This is your deliverer. So the woman in that connotation, that sense, she's created as a deliverer, right? As a deliverer, as a savior, not a big Christological savior, but a savior, because the man was alone and the human was alone, and because to be human was to be alone until there was separation. And after their separation, to be human is no longer to be alone, but to be in company. And perhaps it's in this sense that the woman is created as a helper, as a deliverer, as a savior in Genesis. Kenegdo, she's created as a counterpoint to him, opposite him. Face to face, they faced each other. So there's, even in Genesis 1 and 2 itself, it's debatable how much these gender differences are imagined as hierarchical. But there's no getting around it that certainly by the time they're expelled from the garden, there is a sense of hierarchy, at least in the sense that in the curse to the woman, your desire shall be for him, but he shall rule over you. And then we get to the Song of Songs. And we're going to have the garden coming back. And what is she going to say? 3 times in the song, she affirms the mutuality of their relationship. The first time, she says, I am my lover's and my lover is mine. I am my lover's and he is mine. And the second time she says again, I am my lover's and he is mine. And the third time in chapter 7 she says, I am my lover's and his desire is for me. His desire is for me. Same words as spoken to the woman in the curse of Genesis 3, but reversed. In the curse, you shall, your desire shall be for your husband, and in that relationship, he rules over her. But now, she is his, and his desire is for her. He is the one who has become vulnerable to her, right? In that sense, that he is He is held by his desire for her. And we're back to the garden in the Song of Songs. We've been thousands and thousands of years we've been expelled from the garden and trying to get back there, and it took the Song of Songs to get us back. So for one example, the seeking and finding that we talk about, both chapter 3 and chapter 5, where the woman is running around the city. I'm going to come back to that actually. I'm going to do this. The woman is running around the city looking for her lover. In the first instance, she finds him. In the second instance, she's beaten by the city guards and is not able to find him. And so she appeals to the women of Jerusalem. Can you help me find my lover? And they ask her, among other things, which way did your lover go, you who are the most beautiful of women? Which way did your lover turn, that we may look for him along with you? And she says, my lover has gone down to his garden, to the fragrant plantings, to graze in the gardens, to gather the lilies. I belong to my lover, and my lover, this is the second time that I talked about, I belong to my lover, and my lover belongs to me, the one grazing among the lilies. The Song of Songs has the lovers going again and again to these intimate places. The mother's house, the chamber in which she conceived her. The king's chambers, in this metaphor of the man as the king. The outdoor rendezvous where their bed is greenery and the rafters are junipers and cedars. And again to the garden. Again and again to the garden. And right from the beginning of the song, we're invited to imagine the garden in two ways, as the place that they go together, but also as the woman herself. The woman herself as the place, the locus of their rendezvous, of their safe rendezvous, away from the dangers of the city and its, as I'll argue in a moment, its social constructs of what their relationship should be. So in chapter 4, this is where it's put most directly. After he's done his, the one, the poem of your hair is like a flock of goats coming down from the mountain, your breasts are like two fawns, your neck is like a tower of David. And then the song where he describes her body reaches its culmination. An enclosed garden. Same word as in Genesis for the garden that we think of as the Garden of Eden. An enclosed garden is my sister, my bride. An enclosed pool, a sealed spring. Your limbs are an orchard of pomegranates with all kinds of luscious fruit, henna, spices, nard, and saffron, sweet cane, and cinnamon, with all scented woods, myrrh and aloes, with the very choicest of perfumes. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, streams from Lebanon. Come, north wind, and come, south wind, blow upon my garden, let its perfumes flow. And the woman responds, let my love come to his garden, let him eat its luscious fruit. And the man says, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. Remember, sister is a term of affection in this song because of what's imagined as the intimate relationship that siblings share, that intimate, long-term closeness, yes, between siblings, metaphorically for one's lover. I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh and my spices. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. And then here, CEB gives this to the man. I tend to think it's the women of Jerusalem. Maybe it doesn't matter much, but I tend to think it's the women of Jerusalem offering their sanction, right, on this, and to say, eat, dear friends, drink, and get drunk on love. So we have two counterpoints, right, so far. The prophetic view of the marriage between Israel and the God of Israel as a broken relationship, a dysfunctional relationship in which the woman Israel is unfaithful to the man God. And with its gender hierarchies described, and I held off on this when I mentioned that at the beginning, in this marriage relationship that Hosea described, what I'm about to get to is the way that the prophets and Genesis alike are at least suggesting, in the case of Genesis, and definitely reinscribing the case of the prophets like Hosea, this hierarchical gender relationship between men and women. For the prophet Hosea, chapters 1 through 3, in making his case to the people Israel that they should be faithful, right, to their spouse, Yahweh, Hosea basically makes his case. He says, well, y'all know what marriage is, right? Marriage is a relationship where the man can extract fidelity from his female partner through violence, the threat of violence, deprivation, the threat of deprivation, humiliation, the threat of humiliation, even unto death. And Hosea's listeners are like, yeah, well, you tell us something we don't know. Like, yeah, that's just marriage. And Hosea says, that's the relationship you have with Yahweh, with your God, with the idea that the people will say, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way before. I knew we had a covenant with God, but I never thought of it as a marriage relationship. Oh my goodness, that means that God can extract fidelity from us through violence, the threat of violence, deprivation, the threat of deprivation, even unto death. We better listen to this guy, right? Hosea is making the case that the people should be faithful to their God, Yahweh, because he is like a husband and they are like a wife, and we all know what husbands can do to wives if they choose. So straighten up, Israel. It's the nature of the case that Hosea is making, and it presupposes this radically hierarchical relationship, this power imbalance between the husband and the wife, between the man and the woman in such a relationship. And so then when the rabbis turn to the Song of Songs as a healthy alternative, as an alternative vision of the romantic relationship that exists between the people Israel, between Jews and the God of Israel, the God of the Jews, what have we seen them to be presented with except a song that radically reimagines the nature of this relationship? And many of you have been with us over the weeks and heard much of this. It's not a relationship characterized by a one-way unilateral voyeuristic gaze of the man upon the woman, right? But by a mutuality of an erotic look in which both parties are made vulnerable to the other to be viewed, right? The woman is out there running around independently in the city, right? The thing that the book of Proverbs warned us about. These women who don't know their place, right? In the book of Proverbs, painting their faces and prowling the city looking for the young man, right? That they want to have this romantic encounter with. The book of Proverbs is scared to death, right? It's this is a horrible situation. And for the Song of Songs, this is the ideal, right? The woman running through the city, rising from her own bed, leaving her own house, the house of her father? No, the house of her mother, to find her lover. And in one version, she does find him, right? That's the vision of safety. In the other vision, she at first doesn't find him because of the beating she receives from the guards, because these, in the city, right, in this world, the Song of Songs doesn't pretend that this world doesn't exist of these gender hierarchies where women aren't safe in the streets seeking their ends. But in the vision of the Song of Songs, she finds him nonetheless. She's able to seize him. She seizes him, right? She patrols the city, finds her target, her lover, seizes him, takes him, almost under house arrest, into the house of her mother. She's active, she's dynamic, she seeks, right? Whereas the man, he also seeks. He comes and knocks on her door, asks to be let in, asks to be let in. She decides whether to open the door to her lover or not. or he says over and over in the song, right, how vulnerable he is to her gaze, to her look. Turn your eyes away from me, my beloved, for your glance is terrible, right? He has to shield himself from her. She is as terrible as an army with banners when he describes her beauty. He is at risk of her beauty. She never describes herself as at risk. She never describes herself as at risk. She describes herself as beautiful, black and beautiful. She describes herself as a lily of the valleys, and she describes herself as a wall and she says, my breasts are towers, right? She describes herself in these images of strength. The only times he describes his reactions is to describe himself in terms of how he is vulnerable to her beauty, to her majesty, right? To her indomitable beauty. She, speaking of overturning gender hierarchies, of the two of them, she's the only one who talks about herself. Well, that doesn't sound like a typical gender hierarchy, the typical, at least the way I imagine genders. I joke, but right, we've all seen like even like a first date, and the man is talking about himself. He never talks about himself. She talks about herself. She talks more. In the Song of Songs, we have the speeches of the woman and the speeches of the man. Far more of them are the speeches of the woman. So over and over, this idea of a hierarchy is overturned in terms of these ideas of mutuality, and not only mutuality, but a mutuality that even overbalances in the other direction to center the more vulnerable of the two, the one that's more vulnerable of the two in society. The woman is more vulnerable. It's not always safe for her to walk the streets, right? She can't just seize. In chapter 8, she says to him, when she sees him in the streets, if only he was like a brother to her, so she could kiss him in public, right, and take him home on the streets for everyone to see, instead of doing it at night, right, where hopefully no one will see. In this world where she is not, in the larger picture, free necessarily to walk the streets looking for him, where she's not free to kiss him in public and take him home, the song goes out of its way to create a space, the garden, the vineyard, all of the encounters of their rendezvous, where she is given more power, where she is given more of the power, an overabundance of the power, and the man makes himself vulnerable. In terms of patriarchy, right? In terms of the patriarchal organization of gender relationships, the man, I don't know how else to put it, in the Song of Songs, the woman becomes a man and the man becomes a woman. The woman becomes active. The woman becomes the one that drives the bus, right? The man becomes much more passive. The man becomes the one who accompanies the woman where she's going. The song does not, I don't know how I'm going to try to put this. Help me with this if you would. See if this makes sense to you. I'm still working this out. The song celebrates maleness and femaleness. Maleness and femaleness. The song certainly imagines these two lovers as a male and a female. How else, in this time and place, would two lovers be imagined except as male and female? But I don't think, I don't see their maleness. I don't see his maleness being celebrated. I don't see her femaleness being celebrated. I don't see their union being celebrated as a male-female union. Does that make sense? What is celebrated in the song? She is celebrated. Her body is celebrated, not in terms that emphasize her femaleness, but her strength, right? Her neck is a tower. Her eyes are these doves that shoot forth powerfully. She's stately. She's described, she's described as beautiful. I don't know how to say it. She is described as beautiful, and he is described as beautiful. He is described as beautiful, and she is described as beautiful. I was talking to at least one of you after class one time, and maybe it's come up during our time together. I'm not sure. I think it has. That the gendered language of Hebrew, the you is gendered, right? So when the Song of Songs has this utterance, you are beautiful. If it's the man that's beautiful, we know that because you are a man. You, male, are beautiful. You, female, are beautiful, right? So the you is gendered. The I and the we never is, right? Turn away from, so when the I who is speaking could be anybody. The I who is speaking could be anybody. So in that sense, a celebration of a man singing to a woman is not emphasized in the song. A woman singing to a man is not emphasized. It's only the song that is emphasized. It's only the song one sings to one's lover, to the subject of one's love, that is celebrated. And it's, again, in this context of what seems to me to be a radical overturning of usual gender roles. Any questions or comments so far about this? I normally take those much earlier or sort of invite them much earlier. Susan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why won't the Bible just, right, so we really want the Bible to be a Bible. And by that I mean, and I joke about this sometimes. It's a joke I got from a colleague, David Garber, but he likes to say that the Bible is not a Bible. If you go to like Barnes & Noble and you get like the Bicycle Repair Bible, it's going to be an authoritative manual that addresses every possible situation, hopefully, of bike repair and tells you authoritatively how to deal with it, what to do. That would be the Bike Repair Bible. The Macintosh Bible is the Bible that knows all about the Macintosh, can imagine every possible situation you're going to run into with your Macintosh and how to fix it, how to address it, how to do it right. Culturally, this is what we think of as a Bible. That's why we call it the Bicycle Repair Bible, the Macintosh Bible. And then we go to the Bible, and we expect the Bible to be a Bible. To imagine every possible situation that we can encounter, to tell us authoritatively how to understand those situations and ourselves in those situations, and what to do about it. And the Bible, in my view, as I read the Bible, the more I read the Bible, the less it agrees to be a Bible, right? If I just take little snippets of the Bible here and there and treat them as authoritative, like you might treat a fortune cookie as authoritative, or a little horoscope, then maybe. But as I look at more of like what's written there, look at the larger context, start reading more of how one part of the Bible seems to say something maybe other than what another part of the Bible says, maybe makes different claims about God or different claims for us about gender relationships right here, the less the Bible agrees to be a Bible. And that can be frustrating if what we want of the Bible is that kind of That kind of authority. That kind of authority. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. So, if we imagine, please. Mm-hmm. So much, the Bible doesn't have authority so much as telling you something about God. Uh-huh, uh-huh. You still don't see that in Song of Songs. Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so let's see if we can do both of these. So, for many Christians, the Bible has some kind of authority. Some kind of authority. I mean, y'all aren't going to Sunday morning studies of Euripides. I mean, here you are, I gotcha. You know, it's authoritative in some way. Maybe you just want to get out of the house. I don't know. But in general, folks are treating the Bible with some kind of authority. They disagree about what that authority means, right? And that's part of what I'm suggesting is that maybe I'm drawing sort of I might anticipate that the Bible is going to have the kind of authority that the Macintosh Bible has or the Bicycle Repair Bible. But the more I get to know the Bible, it seems to me the more the Bible keeps suggesting to me that that is not the kind of authority that the Bible is trying to have over me. Otherwise, it wouldn't speak differently at so many places about so many different things. It wouldn't just tell story after story after story that don't contain like commandments for me on how to do stuff. The Bible is inviting me, well, we're back to Teresa of Avila in the way that she read the Song of Songs in the Bible. The Bible, it seems to me, is inviting me into a lifelong relationship of both of us trying to understand one another, right? Trying to understand one another. The Bible trying to make itself understood to me, and in some way me trying to make myself understood to this text, right, in this relationship. It strikes me as just sort of maybe not a coincidence, but as something that I'd like to pursue maybe in the future as I think about it, that's what I see the Song of Songs doing with these gender relationships, right? Maybe we come to the Song of Songs imagining a certain kind of power relation between the genders, between the sexes, I should say, and between people, and what a relationship looks like, a covenant relationship. And the Song of Songs keeps inviting us to rethink what that might look like, right? That is, if to put it most simply, if someone's going to like wave the Bible and say, you know, the man is over the woman, there's roles that are appropriate to a man that are not for a woman, there's roles that are appropriate for a woman and not appropriate to a man, which is fine, I'm getting that because that's what the Bible says. The Song of Songs is also a book in the Bible, I guess is all I want to say. The Song of Songs is also a book in the Bible, and it's insisting on making its voice heard, its countervoice. Does that mean the Song of Songs trumps the book of Hosea? I kind of hope so, but I don't think it really does, because the book of Hosea is still sitting there, and I'm going to have to keep that dialogue going, I suppose. But maybe I'll make my choices. Maybe I'm inclined to say yes to one text and no to another, or no, not yet, or no, I don't understand, or no, I don't agree. To another. I still don't see in the Song of Songs, I still don't see God in the Song of Songs. This is something that was the question, right? Part of the question was I still don't see God in the Song of Songs. And I get it. It would be nice if the song mentioned God even once. The book of Ruth is similar in that respect, and Esther, for communities for whom Esther is Bible. I've been thinking about this off and on, and I'm not sure about it yet. So be gentle with me on this. But you know, I was talking about how for the allegorists, they're very excited about the idea. In Judaism, the allegorists who see Song of Songs as a corrective vision, a healthy vision, a better vision of the relationship between God and Israel. And I want to kind of, you know, mainly because it's not adulterous. Mainly because it presents in this allegory, the people Israel as the woman as faithful, right? We've talked about, in the Song of Songs, there are no lovers' triangles. There is no threat of infidelity or betrayal. the parties are completely mutually devoted to one another. And the rabbis are like, yes, this could be the relationship between Israel and the God of Israel. And for the Christians, between Christ and the church, or between the believer and God, or between the believer and Christ. And I kind of want to press that further and say, is the Song of Songs inviting us to take it even further and say, if I am to imagine the relationship of myself with my God, myself with my Christ, my soul with the Christ to whom I yearn to return, right? To always be seeking and finding. Am I being invited to see that as a radically mutual relationship, right? It's not just me always seeking and finding Christ, but Christ always seeking and finding me. Is the Song of Songs saying that it's not just me as the woman in the Song of Songs, being faithful in the sense of not betraying this relationship, but also seeing myself as active in this relationship, right? As seeking, looking, finding, seizing, Christ. And also God, right, as the counterpart in this relationship, God making God's self in some ways radically female. In terms of the old gender hierarchies, right? Making God's self radically vulnerable, radically subservient. What does Jesus say? If not, I came to serve. I came to be a servant, right? And here we have the man in the Song of Songs taking on this very, I don't know if submissive is the right word, but it's not a dominant role, and it's not a unilateral role, and it's not a dominating role. Right? And I wonder if the Song of Songs is presenting us the possibility of a relationship with God where God is not coercing, I guess I'm just saying, go back to Hosea, where God is not coercing our fidelity through violence and the threat of violence, right? Oh, you're going to go to hell. Oh, you'll be without God forever. Oh, you'll be excommunicated from your church. Whatever that looks like for a given believer in a given community, where faithfulness to God is not extracted in the old Hosea prophetic mode, by threats, but through the assumption on the part of God of vulnerability and invitation and request and a look at us that refuses to be a dominating look. I'm not really finished with my thinking on this, obviously, which is good for you because it's 9:21, and if I was finished in my thinking on this, you wouldn't have time for me to finish it. But I invite you to consider that with me as you maybe return to the allegory and see where it gets you. And if the Song of Songs does invite us to imagine our relationship with our God, as a community or as individuals, our relationship with our God, to keep returning to the Song of Songs as well as other parts of the Bible, but certainly the Song of Songs, to imagine to see how that relationship might be envisioned and what that might mean. Well, it's been a messy 6 weeks. It's a messy Bible, and I'm a messy person. It's been a messy 6 weeks, but I've really enjoyed it, and I've really appreciated your participation. Thank you so much for being a part of this with me. That's all.